Despite posting pictures from my sister's spa day, my parents claimed they were too exhausted to attend my graduation. I remained silent until the valedictorian's name was pronounced. I addressed everyone who failed to turn up while staring into the camera. "It's for you." My sister was weeping in the parking lot 2 hours later. I'm 22-year-old Emma Mitchell, and the proudest day of my life ought to have been the day I was named valedictorian. Rather, it turned into the day I faced years of betrayal from my family. Social media exposed the reality despite my parents' claims that they were too exhausted to attend my graduation. They were having a great time in a spa with my sister Abby. I had suppressed my emotions, concentrated on my studies, and worked for years to get the affection that ought to have come naturally. But something inside of me eventually came out that day when I stood at the stage. My sister ended up weeping in the parking lot before I tell you how. It wasn't easy growing up as the Mitchell family's oldest daughter, who was mostly focused on her studies. I've felt like I've been living in my younger sister's shadow since I can remember. Michael and Catherine Mitchell. My parents were accomplished professionals with impossible standards. Mom worked as a luxury real estate agent while Dad owned his own accounting company. They materially supplied everything: piano lessons, private school tuition, and a lovely suburban home. However, the distribution of emotional support was glaringly unequal. Despite being 3 years younger than me, my sister Abigail "Abby" Mitchell seemed to be able to easily win our parents' love and attention. I was serious and industrious from the time she was born, whereas I was uncomfortable and reserved. Abby was vivacious and gorgeous. She was well-liked and captivating. Really, it wasn't Abby's fault. However, the pattern was set early on and just got deeper as we grew older. I still clearly recall my 8th grade science fair. I had devoted months to studying how various fertilizers affect plant growth, making intricate charts, and getting my presentation ready. I qualified for the regional tournament after taking first place. Abby had taken part in a beginner's dancing recital that same weekend. She didn't have a lot of dancing skill. Although she had just begun classes a month earlier, she found them enjoyable. My blue ribbon was recognized with a preoccupied look when we got home that night. "Emma, that's lovely." My parents posted Abby's recital photo on the refrigerator and spoke about her participation prize and how beautiful she looked on stage during the entire supper. However, my certificate from the scientific fair was hidden in a drawer. This was not a singular occurrence. The trend became painfully predictable over the years. My parents managed to find time in their schedules to attend all of Abby's cheerleading events while missing my debate competitions, where I consistently placed first due to job obligations. Abby's social calendar was the basis for all family vacation plans, even if it required juggling my academic obligations. I was accepted into Northwestern University's intense writing workshop the summer before my junior year, a distinguished experience that may strengthen my college applications. In the same week, my parents planned our family vacation to the Bahamas, when I brought the conflict to light. "Well, you can always find another workshop," my father answered with a shrug. However, Abby and her friends had already arranged to go. While others enjoyed white sand beaches, I spent a week at home by myself. Thankfully, my English teacher, Mrs. Reynolds, saw my writing ability when my parents were too busy to care. It was she who initially recommended that I apply for the workshop. She made arrangements for me to shadow a local journalist when I was unable to attend. "Emma, your words are powerful," she informed me. "Don't allow someone to make you less bright." When there wasn't much parental approval in high school, their remarks got me through. My getaway was college. I decided on a university that was 4 hours away. Far enough to establish my own life there, yet close enough to make periodic visits. My roommate from freshman year, Jessie, suddenly became the sister I had always wanted. Jessie and I clicked right away, but Abby and I had become more and more estranged over the years due to our parents' overt favoritism. She was raised in a big, loving family and found it hard to comprehend why my parents didn't contact or come over much. My explanation, which I've practiced for years, is that they're simply busy. Jessie would stare at me like that, never pushed but a mix of fury and pity. Then, in my sophomore year of American literature, I got to know Tom. Our mutual appreciation of Steinbeck and coffee, strong enough to disintegrate a scoop, brought us together. He was the first bard to genuinely make me feel seen. You're aware that you're worthy of better. After observing a particularly contemptuous phone conversation with my mother, he inquired. I was unsure of how to react. I was completely unfamiliar with the idea. I had centered my whole identity on my academic success in the hopes that my parents would take notice of me at last if I accumulated enough honors degrees and prizes. It turned to become a coping strategy and a means of self-validation. Every academic prize and flawless test result served as more proof that I was important. I was worthy of room. Pay attention. Love. This coping strategy was put to the test during my first semester of college as I was drastically cut off from the comfortable routine of high school and had to deal with increasingly difficult schoolwork. It was the first time I had academic difficulties. When the midterm results were out, I saw 2 BS and a C, and my carefully crafted persona started to fall apart. In my dorm room, I experienced a full-blown panic attack. Persuaded that these subpar marks validated what I had always secretly dreaded, Jesse discovered me hyperventilating on the floor, that I wasn't unique, deserving of neither affection nor attention. I gradually restored my feeling of self-worth with Tom's encouragement and Jesse's help. By the conclusion of the semester, I had improved my grades, but more significantly, I had started to distinguish my personal worth from my academic achievement. However, I found myself working harder than ever by the time I reached my senior year because old habits die hard. I had to keep up my GPA in order to apply to graduate schools in creative writing and journalism. I still want for the outside approval that was so elusive throughout my early years, even though I have grown as a person. I gazed at my computer screen in shock when I received the email from the Dean of Students telling me that I had been chosen as valedictorian. I received the highest academic honor, valedictorian, acknowledgement of 4 years of commitment and diligence. This must be sufficient, right? They would undoubtedly be proud of this. 3 weeks prior to graduation, the valedictorian announcement was made. It took me 5 whole minutes to really register the email, as I recall. I would be giving the graduation address in addition to continuing to hold the top spot in my class. When I phoned my folks, my hands shook. With the sound of a television program blaring in the background, Mom answered on the 4th ring. I said, attempting to sound steady. Mom, I have some fantastic news. I will serve as valedictorian. Then there was a pause. That's lovely, honey. What does that imply exactly? Even though the valedictorian role had been covered in detail at my cousin's graduation 3 years prior, I carefully explained. Congratulations, she murmured, but then abruptly changed the subject. Did you hear that Abby received an invitation to the birthday celebration of Jennifer Lawrence's stylist's assistant? She has a lot of influential contacts in the fashion business. She called out to my dad before I could reply. Michael, Emma has some news about school. She is legitimate. True, something valedictorian. Mom, it indicates that I finished my graduating class with the highest GPA. In the background, I could hear my dad's hushed speech. Then Mom, once more. Congratulations, your father says. When will the ceremony be held again? I ignored my dissatisfaction with their mediocre reaction and concentrated on the details. At 11 a.m. on May 15th, I wanted to let you know directly, but I will be mailing official invites. I immediately got to work making unique handwritten invites when the call ended. Using the calligraphy techniques I had learned on my own during my freshman year, I worked on them for the entire evening. My parents received a customized message with every invitation. I wrote on the significance of having them there for this significant occasion. I made the 2-hour drive home the next weekend to personally deliver the invites. In the hopes of a cozy family evening, I scheduled my visit to take place around supper. My hopes were swiftly crushed as usual. With tales of her fashion internship and the almost famous individuals she had encountered, Abby took over the conversation. While my father nodded gratefully in between mouthfuls of pot roast, my mother listened intently to all that was said. Upon presenting my meticulously designed invites, my father looked at Mai and said, "You traveled so far just to give us these. You had the option to send them." Before putting her invitation aside to resume questioning Abby about some celebrity sightings, my mother at least had the decency to thank me. I affirmed again before I departed that night. "So, both of you will be present at 11 on May 15th. About 2 hours should pass during the ceremony." My dad gave an inattentive nod. "Yes, it has been marked down. Emma, I wouldn't miss it. That single statement wouldn't miss. It fueled me through the next 2 weeks as I worked on my valedictorian speech. I wanted it to be meaningful, not just the typical platitudes about futures and potential. I wrote about resilience, about finding your voice, even when it feels like no one is listening. Mrs. Reynolds now retired, but still my mentor helped me refine it during weekend practice sessions at a local coffee shop. "This is beautiful, Emma," she said after my third revision. "Your parents are going to be so proud." I nodded, wanting desperately to believe her. 3 days before graduation, my phone rang. It was my father. Something in his tone immediately sent warning signals through my body. "Emma, about the graduation ceremony," he began, his voice carrying that particular blend of dismissiveness and impatience. I knew all too well. "Your mother and I have been thinking. And with all the traffic and the long ceremony, well, we're just too tired to make the trip." Too tired. The words hit me like a physical blow to tired, I repeated. "But you promised. I'm valedictorian. I'm giving the speech." "Yes, and we're very proud," he said, though his tone conveyed anything but pride. "But we've had a very busy month, and we have other commitments to consider in the background." I could hear my mother calling something about appointments and schedules. "What other commitments?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Just various things," he replied vaguely. "You know how it is. Your aunt might be able to come, though. I'll have her call you." Before I could protest further, he quickly said, "Gotta go," to end the call. I hope the speech goes well. Capture images. As reality set in, I sat in my dorm room with my phone still firmly grasped in my hand. They would not arrive. My greatest academic accomplishment to date. Perhaps the most significant day of my life to date. Additionally, they were too exhausted to bother driving for 2 hours. The tears suddenly came. I rolled into a ball on my bed, trembling with silent sobs, hot and angry. An hour later, Jesse found me in this manner, hollow-eyed and stained with tears. "They're not coming," I said in a ragged voice. They claimed to be too exhausted. Jesse's face changed from worry to indignation. "They are too exhausted to attend their daughter's graduation where she is the valedictorian." "Do you mean me?" Soon after receiving Jesse's SOS text, Tom showed up. His hand was warm on my back as he sat next to me on the bed. "Mom, I'm so sorry. It's just that is not an excuse." The three of us rehearsed my speech that evening while sitting in my dorm room. "You ought to confront them." With intense devotion blazing in her eyes, Jessie proposed. "Tell them all that they were too lazy to come." Tom was more calm. "Emma, it's your speech. We completely support you regardless of what you choose to say." I gazed at my well-crafted remarks about finding your voice and resiliency. They were now performative and felt empty. However, a new feeling replaced the initial shock and hurt as they started to fade. Willpower. Even though my parents weren't present to see my accomplishment, it was still valuable. Even without them, I would make this graduation memorable. Having made the decision to stick with my original speech, I went to bed that night. I wouldn't let this moment be defined by their rejection. I had no idea that the following morning would bring a revelation that would completely alter my life. I woke up early the morning before graduation, experiencing a peculiar mixture of dread and excitement. My habit caused me to browse through last-minute congrats from classmates and distant family members on social media while still in bed. I saw it at that moment. 3 hours prior, my sister had shared an Instagram story and my finger froze in mid-scroll. Our parents were holding glasses, and Abby, grinning broadly, held up a champagne flute. I needed this because the caption said Family Spa Day. The timestamp was a clear 2:13 a.m., but I blinked sure I was misreading, indicating that this was posted the previous evening. In my dorm room, I was crying because I thought they were tired. With Abby, they were organizing a spa day. I slid through the remainder of Abby's story with shaking hands. They were seen in picture after picture getting massages, facials, and a sumptuous lunch at a fancy restaurant I knew from their city's downtown. My mother and Abby posed in matching fluffy robes in one especially upsetting photo. Abby's shoulders and my mother's arm are both grinning at the camera. Below it is the caption, Mother-Daughter Goals. Best day with my baby girl, my mother had said. I was so hurt by the betrayal that I was having trouble breathing. Their absence from my graduation wasn't the only thing. Their claim of being too exhausted was blatantly false. They weren't at all worn out. They just wanted to spoil my sister over the weekend. Without commenting, I sent Jessie screenshots of everything. She responded right away. Those cunning deceivers. I'm so sorry, Emma. However, apologizing didn't even begin to fill the void that was growing inside my chest. This wasn't just one more setback in a lifetime of setbacks. What I had always suspected but attempted to deny was confirmed by this. They just didn't care as much about me as they did about Abby. My fingers stabbed the screen more forcefully than needed as I attempted to call my sister. I texted her since she didn't respond. I saw your posts about your spa day. Given that my parents informed me they were too exhausted to attend my graduation tomorrow, the timing is intriguing. 20 minutes later, she responded. Avoid being theatrical. They needed to unwind because they have been under a lot of stress. It's not just about you and your schoolwork, school-related items. Graduation reduced to schoolwork for my valedictorian. My phone rang while I was still looking at her contemptuous message. My grandma is calling from Florida. I just wanted to wish you luck tomorrow, Emma, my love. I apologize for being unable to attend, but my hip simply will not cooperate with the travel. I took a deep breath, touched by her call. Thanks, Grandma. I get it. Your folks must be ecstatic. Your mother and I were just discussing their Saturday night dinner reservations yesterday. Michael has been wanting to try this fancy place. The parts apparently fit together. They had dinner plans for the entire weekend in addition to having a spa day. With the exception of one family member, they were enjoying a full family weekend. I have reservations for dinner. My voice was tight as I asked. My grandma paused, feeling that she had said something incorrectly. Oh, I assumed you were aware. They talked about enjoying a lovely family meal following your sister's visit. Dear, oh dear. I sat still glum and clutched in my hand after the call ended, awkwardly still processing the full extent of the betrayal. They were more than just a day away from my graduation. Spa. I was specifically left out of the weekend's schedule of events. I felt something snap inside of me. Years of repressing my feelings, justifying their actions, and convincing myself that if I just accomplished more, they would eventually notice me. All of it solidified into a glaring certainty. I had had enough of being invisible. I took out my laptop and opened my graduation speech document. Now the words I had so painstakingly written seem foolish, almost pitiful in their hopefulness. I immediately made a new document and started writing. Fueled by this final, unforgivable betrayal and a lifetime of neglect, words poured out of me. I wrote about being invisible, the hurt of being ignored, and the harm that conditional love can do. I wrote until the sky outside my window darkened and then brightened again until my fingers burned and cramped in my eyes. At dawn, Tom discovered me still typing with empty coffee cups strewn all over my desk. Have you spent the entire night awake? He inquired. His face was marked with concern. I gave a nod. 2 copies of the document are printed and saved. My speech was revised by me. Raising his eyebrows, he picked up a page and read Emma. This is powerful and raw. But are you certain that your relationship with your parents might suffer as a result of this? I steadily looked into his eyes. What connection? I'm an afterthought in that one. The one in which they openly lie to me. With a sigh, Tom combed through his hair. I understand. Yes, I do. And it's perfectly acceptable for you to feel angry. Just make sure you want this. You cannot retract statements you make in public. I was moved by his concern, but I remained resolute. I placed both of my speech versions in my graduation folder. Tom, I've been invisible all my life. They will finally see me tomorrow. I understood how these things operated, even though they weren't there in person. There would be live streaming of the ceremony. Someone. My aunt is a friend of the family. My parents would learn about it from my grandmother's observations. They would have to admit my suffering for once. I would have to be seen by them. Commencement, dawn morning, clear and bright, a picture-perfect May day that seemed to make fun of my internal conflict. When I woke up from a restless night and set up breakfast on our tiny dorm room desk, Jessie was already awake. Coffee, fresh strawberries, and muffins. Fuel for the valedictorian, she declared with a phony smile. Despite my stomach churning with anxiety, I forced a smile acknowledging her effort. As I meticulously applied makeup determined not to appear as emotionally damaged as I felt we prepared to gather her chatter and fill the void. The boxy, shapeless graduation gown did not look good on anyone. However, I was extra conscious of how I looked under a brand new navy blue dress that I had bought weeks ago when I still thought my parents would see me wearing it. As we were securing our caps, Tom showed up with a small wrapped package containing a bouquet of sunflowers. He kissed my cheek and said, "You look fantastic. These are for you. Later, when you're by yourself, open the gift." I gave him a strong hug. I am incredibly thankful for his consistent presence. We were about to leave when we were startled by a knock on the door. Dressed elegantly in a floral gown, Mrs. Reynolds stood in the hallway with her silver hair styled in a chignon. She said, "I hope I'm not interrupting, but I had to be there for my star student's special day." My eyes welled up with tears as I gave my old teacher a hug. She winked and said, "You traveled this far for hours in the car with my husband snoring next to me. It wouldn't have been missed. I also brought you something." She presented me with a tiny velvet box. There was a silver pen with delicate engravings along the barrel that was clearly antique. My grandmother owned it. Mrs. Reynolds gave an explanation. In the 1920s, when women were not expected to pursue such goals, she worked as a journalist. I believed you ought to have it. One person who breaks boundaries with another. When my own parents couldn't be bothered to drive 2 hours, the gesture almost broke me. My English teacher in high school had come twice that far to help me. Together, Jessie, Tom, and Mrs. Reynolds made it to the ceremony, forming the family I had chosen instead of the one I was born into. While guests found seats in the audience, the graduates were escorted to our seating area. Despite everything, there was a small, illogical part of me that kept looking around the crowd in the hopes of seeing my parents. My gaze instead landed on the 3 empty chairs that mocked me with their emptiness in the reserved section where they should have been. The customary processional kicked off the ceremony, the welcome address by the university president and other recognitions. I made an effort to concentrate and remain in the moment, but my thoughts kept returning to the speech in my folder. 2 options, 2 versions. The first safe version about being resilient and speaking up. The new one too, honest and unvarnished. Born out of years of accumulated hurt and the pain of last night. Which would I pick? When did it happen? The dean of the university walked up to the podium to introduce me. I was positive that everyone could hear my heart pounding so loudly. I am delighted to present the valedictory for this year. The graduating class's highest grade point average was announced by the dean. Many academic accolades, such as the Mercer Creative Writing Fellowship and the Preston Journalism Award, and admission to the esteemed Journalism Master's Program at Columbia University. Emma Mitchell. With sweaty hands gripping the podium folder, I walked to the audience's cheers. I took a quick look at the live stream camera setup, being aware that someone with ties to my family could be observing from somewhere. As I looked out at the sea of faces, I took out both of my speech versions and placed them side by side on the podium. Friends who are supportive, proud households, instructors who have influenced my academic path. When we first embarked on this journey 4 years ago, I made my choice. I started to ignore the first speech. A lot of us arrived here in search of something. Information. Of course, naturally skills. However, a lot of us, including myself, were looking for attention. I dropped the script and my voice got louder with every word. I spoke from the heart, having practiced for weeks. We desired to be seen as important to have our presence and efforts appreciated. As your valedictorian, I stand before you today, a testament to the many hours of effort, sacrifice, and tenacity that have gone into this accomplishment. However, as someone who has discovered that external validation grades awards, I also stand before you. The gap left by those who ought to see you but decide not to is too great for even this great honor to fill. When the audience realized this was not the usual motivational graduation speech, silence descended upon them. I could see Mrs. Reynolds looking on with silent pride, Tom leaning forward intently, and Jessie nodding encouragingly. For many of us, invisibility has taken many different forms. You might not have been the most popular kid. Maybe others were praised and your achievements were downplayed. It's possible that you were told either directly or indirectly that your best effort was never quite sufficient. Everyone in the audience nodded their heads. I wasn't the only one who found resonance in this. I spent years thinking that individuals who ought to love me unconditionally would finally recognize my value if I simply won more accolades, received better grades, and held prestigious positions. The lesson I've taken away from my time at university is that self-awareness is the first step towards becoming visible. After years of holding back, the words came out of a deep, honest place inside of me. I talked about how I was able to connect with friends who embraced my accomplishments rather than downplayed them. Whereas family only saw ordinary, I spoke of mentors who saw potential. I then arrived at my speech's climax. I had written those words during the gloomiest hours of the night. My family should be seated here, but when I look out at the audience today, I see empty seats. They informed me that they were too exhausted to go. However, social media indicates that they found the energy to celebrate this weekend in other ways. The crowd murmured, but that's okay because I've learned the most important lesson of all from their absence. Even if they aren't the ones celebrating, they should know that I am enough and that my accomplishments are deserving of recognition. Knowing that they might eventually hear what I have to say, I stare straight into the livestream camera. Therefore, to everyone who failed to show up, not just today, but all my life, it's for you. As a declaration of independence, not out of rage. My past was shaped by your absence, but my future will not be shaped by it. Before the audience erupted, there was complete silence for 3 heartbeats. The enthusiastic applause from my fellow graduates indicated that many of them had experienced feelings of invisibility at some point in their lives. Some faculty members wiped away their tears as they nodded. Mrs. Reynolds was crying aloud. The moment was captured on her phone. Dazed, I went back to my seat. The rest of the ceremony went by in a haze of diploma covers and handshakes. Following the recessional, I was surrounded by professors and classmates who congratulated me on both my academic success and the bravery of my speech. You expressed what a lot of us have experienced. With tearful eyes, a classmate told me, "We appreciate you speaking for us today." That was not what I expected, Miss Mitchell, but it was exactly what needed to be said the university president himself as he shook my hand. I experienced an odd lightness throughout it all. The pain persisted. Why wouldn't it? However, expressing my truth had freed a part of me that had been imprisoned for years. Notifications were already buzzing on my phone. Clips of the speech were being shared on the university's social media accounts, indicating that it had left an impression. For now, I ignored the gadgets. Instead, I decided to celebrate with those who had come to see me. Tom, Mrs. Reynolds, and Jesse took me to a local restaurant for lunch, where they shared their favorite parts of the ceremony and toasted my accomplishment with sparkling cider. I gave myself permission to just enjoy their company and the achievement of graduating for a few hours, putting my family's thoughts on the back burner. However, I was aware of the consequences as the festivities came to an end, and we got ready to head back to campus for the last dorm checkouts. I simply didn't anticipate it starting in the auditorium's deserted parking lot where I had gone back to get the diploma cover I had inadvertently forgotten. Giovanni's Italian restaurant's post-graduation education celebration was everything I could have imagined. Genuine laughter, friendly chatter, and the consoling presence of people who genuinely cared about me. Knowing that I hadn't eaten much in the previous 24 hours, Jesse continued to refill my water glass and sneak extra breadsticks onto my plate. Throughout the meal, Tom's hand remained reassuringly on mine, his thumb grazing my knuckles in silent support. Despite the emotional weight of the day, Mrs. Reynolds managed to make us laugh by telling us about her own college graduation from decades ago. Instead of worrying about who wasn't there to see it, I gave myself permission to just be there for those 3 hours and enjoy the accomplishment. My phone sounded and slipped into my pocket, flashing with alerts every now and then, but I chose to ignore them all. I and the family I had selected owned this moment. Mrs. Reynolds didn't bring up the online response until we were getting ready to depart, paying the bill and packing up our things. Emma, a lot of people are paying attention to your speech. A video that the university shared on social media has received hundreds of shares already. A twinge of nervousness swept through me. Have any of the comments caught your attention? Very positive, she told me. Many people who have felt ignored or underappreciated found resonance in your words. Something universal was given voice by you. Still not ready to check my phone, I nodded. I'd better return to campus, I said. We have until 5 o'clock to finish cleaning out our dorm room, and I left my diploma cover in the auditorium. In the restaurant parking lot, we bid each other farewell and made plans to stay in touch. Mrs. Reynolds made me promise to call her the next week to discuss my impending move to New York for graduate school, but she was driving home that evening. Tom would visit the dorm later to assist with last-minute packing, but he had to work the evening shift at the campus bookstore. Jesse immediately went back to finish cleaning our room, but I took a detour to the now empty auditorium to get my misplaced diploma cover. My grandmother took the first call as I pulled into the almost empty parking lot. I responded, bracing myself. Emma, you gave a lovely speech. I think you've caused quite a stir within the family, she said, her voice faltering a little. My throat constricted. They witnessed it. Melissa, your cousin, called your mother right away while she was watching the live stream. I get the impression that things are tense right now. I thought it was the understatement of the century. Are they upset? In spite of the empowerment of the day, I asked, feeling suddenly very young and vulnerable. There is definitely something, my grandmother said tactfully. However, Emma, I want you to know that I'm proud of you for speaking your mind and for your academic accomplishments. It was not going to be simple. Something cold inside of me was warmed by her words. Grandma, thank you. That is very significant. I said I would give her a call shortly, then hung up and looked at my other alerts. Members of the extended family who had viewed the internet video sent 6 texts. The most recent reading was a flurry of increasingly irate texts from Abby and 2 voicemails from my father, which I wasn't prepared to hear. How could you bring such shame to our family? Your words have literally brought Mom to tears. Our entire weekend has been ruined by you. I put the phone back in my purse after silencing it once more. Unlocked the auditorium was eerily quiet following the festivities of the morning. With ease, I located my diploma cover on the chair I had been using. I was about to leave when I noticed some activity close to the exit. Standing in the doorway was Abby, face flushed with rage, arms crossed. My sister had the same appearance as usual. Stylishly dressed in a blouse and designer jeans that likely cost more than my whole graduation ensemble. Perhaps as a result of the spa treatment she had received while I was getting ready for the most significant day of my academic career, her hair was freshly styled. "Why are you here?" Sincerely surprised to see her, I inquired. "We spent hours driving to clean up the mess you made." She lost her temper. "Your parents are searching for you at your dorm." The idea of my parents confronting Jessie made my stomach turn. Abby wasn't done, so I took out my phone to warn her. "Emma, how could you have been so self-centered, so vindictive and petty? To gain attention, you have made our entire family feel ashamed." I actually laughed at the ridiculousness and complete backwardness of the accusation. The sound reverberated through the deserted auditorium, sharp and humorless. Selfish. I'm self-centered. It's very wealthy. From someone who has spent 22 years with our parents' full attention. Abby gave a dramatic eye roll. The pathetic, ignored older sister routine is back. "Emma, you decided to be uninteresting. You put reading and studying ahead of having a real personality. I'm more interesting than you, and that's not my fault." Like a broken dam, years of pent-up hurt and resentment erupted. Fascinating. Do you believe that's the purpose of this, Abby? Let me remind you of a couple things. I won the state writing competition when I was 16 years old. My essay was not even read by my parents. As a consolation, they took you shopping and hired a private tutor when you received a C+ on a history paper that same week. They hardly acknowledged my partial scholarship acceptance to this university. They paid for the whole trip when you chose to take a gap year to travel to Europe. Every family vacation, every Christmas, every birthday. The pattern has been blatantly obvious. I was requesting equal treatment, not preferential treatment. Abby's protective stance wavered a bit. "It's unfair. You two have always had their support." "Really? Give one name. It's time they put me before you." "They once decided to go to something that was significant to me, if it interfered with your timetable." Unable to come up with an example, she opened her mouth and then shut it again. "They couldn't travel 2 hours to witness my valedictorian graduation." "Abby, valedictorian. However, they were very energetic for your spa day." I showed her the screenshots of her own Instagram posts after taking out my phone. What's the worst part, the deception? If they had simply stated that we would prefer to spend the weekend with Abby, that would have been honest, at least. Honest, but cruel. Rather, they claimed to be too exhausted, but in reality, they had planned a whole weekend of events that specifically left me out. Abby's expression changed. A glimmer of uncertainty appeared on her face. "I didn't. They didn't inform me that they wouldn't be attending your graduation. All they said was that they wanted a weekend with their family." As the ramifications became clear, her voice faltered. A family weekend spent apart from the whole family. For a long time, we stood silent. The burden of years of imbalanced family relationships looming over us. Abby's voice was smaller and less confident when she spoke again. "They always gave the impression that you didn't want to fit in, that you valued reading over spending time with your family, and that you believed your academic accomplishments made you superior to us." I shook my head, not believing it. "Abby, is that what they told you? I longed to fit in throughout my entire childhood, to draw attention. You know why I put in so much effort in school, since it was the only time I had anyone's attention. Due to the fact that my father only ever complimented me on my grades." Tears filled Abby's eyes, and her meticulously applied makeup started to run. "They constantly gave me the impression that I was superior to you and somehow more worthy of their time and consideration. I didn't request that. That was never a responsibility I desired." She sank onto a nearby chair as her defenses completely collapsed and tears began to pour down her cheeks. It was draining. Emma has to be flawless and is always the favorite. Every social triumph was always accompanied by the knowledge that Mom lived vicariously, and Dad used my popularity as a gauge of his success. I watched in silence as my sister, who was always self-assured, broke down. I had not anticipated this confrontation. Concerned by the sounds of distress, a campus security guard peered into the auditorium. "Ladies, is everything all right in here?" Abby wiped her eyes, quickly streaking her cheeks with black mascara. "We're all right," I replied, "just chatting on the day of graduation." Despite his suspicious appearance, he nodded and stepped back, leaving us in utter silence. Abby looked up at me with a vulnerability and rawness I had never seen in her face. "I always felt superior to you because of them." Softly, she repeated, "I didn't request that." Her statement disarmed me because it was honest. For the first time, I thought about how Abby, the golden child, might have been impacted by our parents' favoritism. She would have been expected to live up to our parents' social expectations forever. "Would you like a ride back to school?" At last, I inquired. I'm at a loss for words. Abby gathered her high-end handbag with trembling hands and nodded. "My vehicle is being serviced. While they went to your dorm, Dad dropped me off to look for you." It was quiet as I walked to my car. We drove the short distance back to campus, each of us lost in our own thoughts. Neither of us said anything. It wasn't a friendly silence, but it wasn't hostile either, more akin to the still charged silence that follows a thunderstorm. However, the immediate threat is no longer there. I reflected on the fact that this might be the first open discussion we had had in years, if at all. It wouldn't resolve every issue. 2 decades of unbalanced family dynamics couldn't be undone in a day, but something seemed to have changed. The facade that had characterized our relationship for as long as I could remember had a tiny crack in it. I looked at my sister, who was crying as we got closer to the dorms, and saw that this argument had taken a turn neither of us could have predicted. I still had to deal with my parents, and the fallout from my speech was only getting started. For the first time, though, I questioned whether Abby would be more of an ally than an enemy in the inevitable family reckoning. After the emotional altercation with Abby in the auditorium, I didn't get much sleep that night. There had been its own drama in going back to the dorm. In fact, my parents had visited, but they discovered my room was empty. They had gone to their hotel and told me to give them a call right away. I didn't. Instead, with Jesse's assistance, I completed my packing bid, Tom farewell for the time being, and checked into a budget motel in the area. Before I could confront my parents, I needed time to think things through. An unpleasant surprise, however, arrived the following morning. My parents were waiting in the hallway outside my room when I went back to the dorm to pick up my final few boxes. Controlled anger tightened my mother's face. Her makeup, which is usually flawless, seemed a bit too heavy, as though it had been applied quickly. My father stood with his arms folded, a look of impatience and annoyance on his face. The look he is usually saved for employees who have irritated him. When my mother finally saw me, she said, "It's been nearly an hour since we started waiting. Your phone has not been answered." I debated whether or not to let them in as I unlocked my door. I answered in a cool tone, "I was busy. Graduating. Leaving. You are aware of the occasions when you were too exhausted to go." My dad's nose wrinkled. "Young lady, don't take that personally. Instead of being sarcastic, you ought to be apologizing for the stunt you pulled yesterday." I made a quick, non-humorous sound effect by laughing. "You mean being honest about being constantly ignored all my life? That stunt." Jessie was already inside sorting through the last of our things together when I pushed the door open. She began to excuse herself when she noticed the tension, but I grabbed her by the arm. "Stay, please." Silently, I said. The presence of a witness would prevent this altercation from turning into their usual gaslighting. My mother's eyes swept critically across the half-full room as my parents filed in. She started off without introducing herself, which made your speech totally inappropriate. In front of hundreds of people, you degraded our family. Friends, family, and even your father's business associates have called us. I came across that video on the internet. I apologize if the truth makes you feel ashamed. I answered, taken aback by my own composure. I said, "But I see you're not denying anything." My father moved forward, adopting the menacing pose that had so frequently kept me quiet as a child. apart from making your mother cry and causing needless family strife. What do you think you've achieved with this brief performance? I steadily looked into his eyes. Dad, that wasn't a show. It was the result of being treated as though I didn't matter as much as Abby for 22 years, of my accomplishments being disregarded. Even though her smallest achievements are praised, she is misled and kept out of family gatherings. My mom let out a frustrated sigh. Emma, you're being overly dramatic as usual. We have given you the same amount of support as your sister. Didn't we pay for your schooling? I made a partial correction. Most of it was paid for by my scholarship. Recall that I never imagined I'd use the folder I had prepared months ago when I moved to my desk and took it out. Let's discuss support, though, since you brought it up. I spread out the contents of the folder on my desk after opening it. For Abby's 16th birthday cards from years past family calendars and financial records had been discreetly gathered. You traded my car for hers, I received a $50 bookstore gift card. Abby purchased the newest MacBook Pro when she needed a laptop for school. Every Christmas, I received a refurbished model that was 2 years older. She had a much bigger stack of presents than I did. My mom gave me an eye roll. Are you really comparing the values of gifts? How materialistic. I retorted. It's not about the money. What matters is the message those differences conveyed. Okay, though. Now let's discuss non-material support. I produced a calendar that was hand-drawn. During my junior and senior years of high school, I kept track of every school function for us both. You went to 45 of Abby's 47 events. 39 things happened to me. You went to 8, and only if they weren't in opposition to anything Abby owned. The redness in my father's face had intensified. This is absurd. You maintained documents as if you were a prosecutor assembling evidence against your own relatives. I maintained documentation because you deceived me. Each time I point out the difference in your treatment of us. Just like you're doing now, I answered calmly. Despite his best efforts to blend in, Jesse had moved to the window and was obviously uncomfortable with the confrontation that was taking place. When my mother saw that she was uncomfortable, she tried to take advantage of it. It's a personal family issue. Maybe your friend ought to go out. No, I said firmly. Jessie remains. Over the past 4 years, she has been more like family to me than either of you. My mother's face briefly crumpled as the words hit her like a physical blow before she collected herself. But my father only became more irate, following all that we have done for you. His voice rose as he started. We have given and sacrificed, and the gratitude is this. We are humiliated in public, and now these unfounded charges. When I asked my father why I couldn't go to an academic summer program while Abby was sent to a costly performing arts camp, he said nearly the exact same thing. There was something in his tone that brought back memories. All of a sudden, a pattern that I had never been able to fully recognize emerged. This has nothing to do with me, does it? Slowly, I asked. Dad, this is about you, your personal fears. My academic achievement makes you angry because it brings attention to your own unrealized potential. In an instant, his face turned from red to white. My mom moved in between us. Emma, that's sufficient. However, the truth had become crystal clear. Dad, you were the family's smartest member, weren't you? The person who was meant to attend college turned into something remarkable. However, you didn't. You made do with a respectable but unremarkable career. And each time I succeeded academically, it brought back memories of your own setbacks. With his hands balled into fists at his sides, my father turned away. No denial could have supported my theory more than his silence. I looked to you, the pretty popular high school girl, and my mother. Abby reminds you of yourself at her age, so you live vicariously through her. You dress her up like a doll, pushing her to be everything you believe you could have been, and pouring all your unmet social expectations into her. The carefully crafted facade of my mother broke. You don't know what you're discussing. Her voice was unconvinced as she whispered. I retorted, I have all the ideas. I've been watching this dynamic for 22 years. You lack subtlety. Our stalemate was broken by a knock on the door. With her eyes red-rimmed from crying, Abby stood in the doorway with an inquisitive yet determined expression. She entered without waiting for an invitation, saying, "I thought I'd find you all here. Abby." My mom instantly became happier and reached for her favorite daughter. "Soon we'll be leaving this place. Then as scheduled, we can head to brunch." Abby refrained from embracing our mother. Instead, in a move so surprising that everyone in the room froze, she came to stand next to me. "In fact, Mom, I believe we should wrap up this discussion. Every one of us." My parents looked at each other in alarm. Their script did not call for this. Instead of being divided, their daughters are united. My father stated firmly that there was nothing to talk about. As usual, Emma is acting dramatic and attempting to command attention. "No, Dad," Abby said, speaking to our parents in a voice that was louder than I had ever heard. "Emma is being honest. We all know you've always favored me." There was complete stillness after that. First, to recover, my mother laughed uneasily. "Honey, that's not true, Abby. Both of you are equally loved by us. So why are you unable to recall a single instance in which you picked Emma over me?" Abby posed a challenge. "You were planning a weekend of activities with me, so why can't you explain why you lied about being too exhausted for her graduation? My dad tried something different." He looked sharply at Jessie and said, "We're not having this conversation in a dormitory with an audience." This is a family-run company. To everyone's surprise, I said, "Fine. Would you mind opening the room for us?" "Jessie, for once, I believe my family needs to have an open discussion." Jessie paused, evidently worried about abandoning me. "Are you certain?" I nodded, and as the door closed behind her, she grabbed her purse and gave me a supportive squeeze on my arm before leaving. I went back to my folks. Let me make one thing very clear. Your approval is no longer required of me. I don't require your approval, love, or attention. However, having those things as a child would have been nice. I do require honesty, though. Put an end to gaslighting. No more justifications. No more acting as though there is no favoritism. On the edge of my bare bed, my mother sat heavily. She said, "We never meant to make you feel less loved." And I believed I heard a trace of sincere regret in her voice. "You were always so self-sufficient and independent. Abby was more in need of us." "No," Abby said. "You weren't more needed by me. I needed you and you needed me. There is a distinction." Our mother appeared stunned. My father stood there, his tense posture radiating physical discomfort. "Emma, what specifically do you want from us?" An expression of regret. "All right, we apologize if you felt ignored, but this public humiliation was totally uncalled for. It wasn't my intention to embarrass you. I spoke the truth. I had to speak my truth after 22 years of silence, so I did. And I believe a part of me hoped that you might finally hear me if I spoke loudly and in public enough." The discussion went on for almost an hour, alternating between bargaining anger denial and sometimes fleeting moments of sincere introspection. Although he didn't deny it, my father never fully admitted that he was resentful of my academic achievement. My mother wept multiple times when pressed, alternating between manipulative self-pity and sincere regret. What shocked me the most throughout it all was Abby's unwavering support. Unexpectedly, the sister who had profited from our parents' favoritism her entire life became my staunchest ally, pointing out trends I had overlooked and refusing to back down when our parents tried to downplay or ignore my experiences. Little had been decided by the time our parents eventually departed, promising incoherently to consider everything and improve family communication. My speech still infuriated them. They are still defending their parenting decisions. They were still hesitant to accept the harm they had done. Nevertheless, something had changed. I had told my parents the whole truth for the first time in my life without flinching, without regretting, without giving in. Thankfully, Abby was standing next to me when the door shut behind them. In stunned silence, Abby and I exchanged glances. It was. She got serious. For her, I completed. I appreciate you supporting me. That wasn't necessary for you to do. My normally self-assured sister Abby shrugged a gesture that was unusually uncertain. But I did. All of your statements were accurate. It was simpler to accept the favoritism than to question it, even though I've known it for years. Seated on the desk chair, she appeared suddenly vulnerable and youthful. I apologize, Emma. I ought to have spoken up sooner. When they downplayed your accomplishments or offered justifications for missing your events, I ought to have retaliated. Emotionally spent, but oddly lighter than I had felt in years, I leaned against the wall. You weren't supposed to correct our parents' actions. She admitted that I could have been a better sister, but perhaps I wasn't. We started talking and became more open than we had ever been before. Abby acknowledged that my intelligence and academic achievement had always subtly intimidated her. I admitted to being envious of her social graces and our parents' evident admiration. We discussed how our parents' toxic relationship had molded us, with Abby becoming a people pleaser out of fear of losing our parents' conditional approval, and me becoming an achievement-oriented perfectionist in need of validation. After a pause in conversation, I informed her that I had received an offer to work at the Atlantic, a lower-level role in their division of digital media. Next month, I'll be in New York. Abby's gaze expanded. Emma, that's incredible. Why didn't you speak up sooner? She nodded in comprehension when I shot her a stern look. Correct? Due to the fact that Mom and Dad would have managed to change the topic. That's right. Well, she said, I'm really happy for you. And I took her word for it. Perhaps. When you're settled in New York, perhaps we could grab coffee. I've also been considering relocating there. In actuality, fashion marketing opportunities abroad are superior to those at home. I felt a genuine connection with my sister for the first time in years, if not our entire lives. It wasn't the rivalry our parents had cultivated or the resentment that had grown, but rather the potential for a genuine relationship based on respect and honesty. I came to the realization that although my graduation speech had not miraculously improved my relationship with my parents, it had opened the door for something I had never anticipated as we were packing up my dorm room. An opportunity to get to know my sister as a friend rather than a foe. I spent the summer following graduation getting ready for my new life in New York City. I packed up the few things I had acquired in college, found a small apartment in Brooklyn that I could almost afford with my entry-level publishing salary, and bid Tom and Jessie farewell for the time being, promising to come as soon as possible. During those 3 months, my parents made exactly 2 phone calls. Short, uncomfortable chats that avoided mentioning my graduation speech or our subsequent altercation, and asked petty questions about my moving plans. I didn't make the call long. Neither offended them nor pretended that everything had been resolved overnight. I was still learning how to set boundaries for this new stage of our relationship. Abby was a surprise. Almost every day, my sister texted me with everything from funny memes about sibling relationships to apartment listings she thought would fit me. When she went to a networking event for the fashion industry in New York, after years of parental manipulation, we uncovered common interests and viewpoints during our weekend-long exploration of the city. I always thought you hated me, she confessed while we were in Central Park sharing expensive coffee. You were never hated by me. I was honest with her. I detested comparisons to you. It wasn't your fault, but I detested being found wanting. I learned more about journalism during my first few months at the Atlantic than I did during my 4 years of college. The standards were high and the pace unrelenting, but instead of being a last-ditch effort to get attention, my perfectionism worked for me for the first time in my life. My editors appreciated my thorough research and clear writing. My willingness to assist with last-minute fact-checking was valued by my coworkers. In contrast to the achievement-oriented persona I had created to gain my parents' approval, I started to develop a professional identity. Before I left for New York, therapy helped at Tom's gentle insistence. I had located a therapist who focused on family dynamics and emotional neglect in children. Although she didn't provide simple answers or fast fixes, Dr. Levine gave me invaluable tools to help me process the complicated feelings surrounding my family. During one particularly challenging session following a tense phone call with my mother, she reminded me that healing isn't linear. Both forward and backward steps will be taken. Instead of reacting from past hurts, what matters is that you are now conscious of the patterns and actively choosing how to react. I continued to have very little and cautious contact with my parents. I responded to their occasional messages and sent courteous text updates about my work, but I kept a safe distance to preserve my still fragile emotional boundaries. My mother made multiple attempts to use guilt to regain her power. Despite everything we've done for you, we don't hear from you very often anymore. But I'm not going to use these strategies. My dad. As expected, with the exception of the odd work-related query cloaked in paternal curiosity, he retreated into cool detachment and spoke mostly through my mother. It was both liberating and confusing to spend the first holiday season away from home. The normalcy of Jessie's invitation to spend Thanksgiving with her family opened my eyes. Parents who genuinely listen to their kids' responses when they ask them questions. Siblings who quarreled but eventually stood by one another. Talks that weren't like negotiating a minefield. Something unexpected happened around Christmas. My father's letter. Since Emma was used in the majority of his correspondence, it was handwritten on his own stationery rather than dictated to his assistant. There was no preamble. I've been reflecting on your remarks at graduation and beyond, as well as how my own academic setbacks may have impacted our relationship. Even so, I disagree with some of your descriptions. I acknowledge that your viewpoint might have some merit. My dad also never showed up to my school functions. I told myself that I was better and different. However, I might have replicated more patterns than I would like to acknowledge. This is just an observation that it has taken me months to admit even to myself, and it is not an excuse. The letter was 2 pages long. It wasn't exactly an apology, but it was the closest my father had ever been to sincere introspection. An invitation was sent out at the end. I want to try having a conversation with you without your mother around, if you don't mind. Man to man, as it were. There are some topics that may be simpler to address head-on. I went over the letter more than once. Feelings that alternate between deep-rooted skepticism and cautious optimism. I talked to Dr. Levine about it, and we decided to meet when my father was in New York on a business trip. It was easier for me to keep my emotional composure when we met at a calm restaurant close to his hotel, which is neutral territory. At first, the conversation was stilted. We both resorted to safe subjects like his business and my job. However, as the meal went on, an extraordinary event occurred. My father started talking about his own early years, the pressure he had experienced as the smart kid in a blue-collar family, and his choice to forgo his academic goals in favor of the stability of accounting. He acknowledged that instead of looking me in the eyes when you began to win all those academic honors, he was studying his water glass. I thought I had buried my regrets decades ago, but it brought them back. That could help explain my behavior, but it's not an excuse. There was not a full reconciliation. For that, too much damage had been done. However, it was the beginning of a more sincere partnership. Reconciliation was approached by my mother in her own unique manner. My favorite dessert from childhood was included in a care package she sent to my apartment. A photo album I had never seen before, and homemade chocolate chip cookie bars. Numerous photos of me as a child, including winning prizes, acting in school productions, and studying at my desk, were included. There were moments I didn't even know she had recorded. She had written, "I see you," on the front cover. I always did. It wasn't a complete acknowledgement of the past or a pledge to change, even when I didn't express it clearly like in my father's letter. But it was a gesture that would have been unimaginable prior to my graduation speech, forcing our dysfunctional family dynamics into the open. I discovered that I was blossoming in unexpected ways as winter gave way to spring. I found hobbies and skills I had never pursued before, freed from the never-ending pressure to win my parents' approval. a passion for rock climbing, and a talent for photography. My mother would have rejected my taste for spicy food as being too foreign. I developed friendships based on sincere kinship rather than practicality or tactical advantage. I even resumed dating, but I continued to communicate with Tom on a regular basis. While allowing room for our individual journeys, our relationship evolved into something that defied traditional labels and went beyond friendship. The thing that surprised me the most was probably how much I loved mentoring young writers. I offered to assist the college students in navigating the emotional and technical facets of breaking into such a competitive field as part of the Atlantic's summer internship program. After seeing me work with an extremely nervous intern, my supervisor said, "You're good at this. You have a talent for assisting others in discovering their voice." I recognized the irony that I had a gift for assisting others in expressing themselves after years of fighting for recognition. The editor of a significant literary magazine emailed me nearly a year after I graduated. They found a recording of my valedictorian speech online while working on a special issue on family dynamics. If I were to write a longer essay on those themes, would I be interested? It was too significant to miss the chance to turn my own suffering into something that could assist those going through comparable difficulties. The most shared article from that issue was an essay I wrote titled "Invisible Daughter Finding Voice in the Shadow of Conditional Love." Hundreds of messages flooded in from people who found hope and validation in my path to self-acceptance and who saw themselves reflected in my words about their own family experiences. Particularly noteworthy was a message from Mrs. Reynolds, my English teacher in high school, who had supported me when my parents were unable or unwilling to do so. She wrote, "I always knew your words would change lives. I simply had no idea how many, including yours, there would be." Another significant event occurred that spring. Abby relocated to New York and started working 10 blocks from my office for a fashion marketing company. We started having weekly lunches together, progressively establishing the connection we ought to have had from the beginning. "Will Mom and Dad ever truly change, in your opinion?" she inquired. I gave the question a lot of thought as we ate expensive salads in Bryant Park one day. "I believe they can make minor adjustments. Dad is making a limited effort. Mom alternates between making a sincere effort and reverting to her old habits. However, they are in their 50s with decades of ingrained habits and unquestioned problems. I don't anticipate significant changes." Abby gave a contemplative nod. "What does that signify for us then, for the future of our relationship with them?" "It suggests that we establish boundaries, in my opinion. We don't expect them to change completely. We accept whatever positive changes they can make. We strengthen our bonds with one another, distance ourselves from them, and above all, end the cycle. Their dysfunction is not passed on to our future families." The most important lesson I took away from this entire experience was encapsulated in that conversation. That although we have no control over the family we are born into, we do have control over how we react to their constraints. We have the option to break or maintain unhealthy patterns. We have the option to either define ourselves differently as adults or stay stuck in the roles that were assigned to us as children. The recovery wasn't finished. Maybe it wouldn't be. Completely. My parents and I continued to have challenging phone conversations. There were still times when old wounds came back. There were still occasions when I caught myself not believing in my own intrinsic value, but instead looking for approval from others. But those moments grew fewer and weaker with every month that went by. I was no longer the daughter who was invisible and frantically trying to get attention. I had discovered my voice and a sense of calm that I never would have imagined. As I reflect on that crucial moment at the graduation podium, I see that by speaking my truth and refusing to keep quiet about the hurt of being ignored, I freed my family members, not just myself, from the roles we had been forced into. Although our relationships are still ongoing projects, they are now based on truth rather than deception and reality, rather than meticulously preserved illusions. Therefore, I want you to know that your experience is legitimate if you're watching this and can relate to my story and your own family. Have you ever felt invisible, unimportant, or somehow less deserving of love? You should be recognized for your suffering. You have a right to be heard. Speaking our truth, even when it's painful, can be the most courageous thing we can do at times, particularly when it disturbs the cozy lives we have been leading. Have you ever felt unimportant or invisible because of your family? Thank you for viewing. Be careful. I wish you luck. Asterisk. Maybe you have some new questions now that you've heard the narrative today. Or perhaps every day on Reddit, it has evoked some old recollections. We are all connected by new experiences and situations that produce new stories. Everybody has a different life path, and we all attempt to comprehend the world in our own manner. Moments like this serve as a reminder that we are all human, experiencing joy and sorrow, and always learning new things. Please feel free to tell your friends about this tale if you liked it. We constantly value your opinions and suggestions, since they inspire us to produce even better material. Every tale has a different viewpoint, and we want to make sure that our material is approachable and varied by understanding everyone's viewpoints. These kinds of stories teach us that everyone's journey through life is unique and that we may learn new things from hearing other people's stories. You may also tell us your own tales. We also value the experiences you have. Please share your thoughts if you liked this video. Our goal is to consistently provide content that inspires you and provides you with fresh concepts. Your comments are still valued, even if you have previously watched this video. We can enhance our material and provide our visitors a fresh viewpoint with each piece of input. The numerous accounts that have been published on Reddit and throughout the globe are far more numerous than what we witnessed. It serves as a reminder of how we all attempt to make sense of life by talking to one another about our experiences. This film only served as an illustration of how we attempt to learn about many facets of life and establish connections with people via storytelling. We intend to keep sharing tales like this that foster mutual learning and development. We appreciate your time, and please remember to check back soon for more stories. For more incredible material, kindly like and follow if you haven't already. Your encouragement keeps us going, and we'll work to provide you with more inspiring and thought-provoking tales. Be careful and continue to be intrigued till the next time. Asterisk.